You bought a house for your parents, intending to provide them with stability, yet discovered they gifted it to your sister without telling you. As the eldest child, you had always felt the weight of your parents' expectations, especially in contrast to your sister, who was treated with a level of care and freedom that you never experienced. While you worked hard in school, and they took out loans to ensure you received a tech education, your sister was encouraged to explore her interests without academic pressures. You often felt like a commodity, molded by their dreams and subjected to guilt trips about their sacrifices. After you graduated and found a stable job, your parents made it clear that they expected you to buy them a house. They had made sacrifices for your education, and they wanted to see a return on that investment, even though you were just starting out in your career and struggling to manage your finances. The pressure mounted as they dropped hints about the house. You felt overwhelmed and manipulated by their expectations. Ultimately, you decided to buy them a house after 5 years of hard work and saving, thinking it was the least you could do. For 3 years, you diligently made mortgage payments, even paying extra to pay it off sooner, all while harboring dreams of your own, traveling, buying your own house, starting a family. But after a long period of distance, you finally decided to surprise your parents with a visit. However, upon arriving, you learned from your sister that they had given her the house, a decision made without your knowledge. She explained nonchalantly that your parents thought she needed it more since she was planning to have a baby soon. Stunned and enraged, you found yourself grappling with feelings of betrayal and disbelief. You learned that your parents had moved into a rental apartment across town, which struck you as absurd given the years you had spent working to provide them with a home. The emotional weight of their choices pressed down on you as you struggled to process the situation. Feeling robbed of your effort and sacrifice, you left your sister's new home, your mind racing with thoughts of anger and hurt, and you decided to confront your parents at their new apartment. Overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened, you arrived at your parents' new apartment unannounced, filled with confusion and anger over the situation with your sister and the house. When your mom opened the door, you wasted no time confronting her. You demanded to know what was going on after hearing from your sister that she had been given the house you bought and had been paying for. Your mom had the audacity to smile as if it was a trivial matter and tried to calm you down. She insisted you should come inside, but you were too upset to sit, you needed answers. You couldn't believe she thought you wouldn't mind the house being given away without your knowledge. Your voice escalated in anger as you questioned her reasoning. Your mom sighed, almost exasperated, claiming they thought it was okay since you were doing well financially. She explained that your sister was planning to have a baby, and that having the house meant they wouldn't have to worry about rent, allowing them to focus on the baby's well-being. That logic infuriated you. You retorted that you didn't care where your niece or nephew was born and pointed out that you had grown up in a rented place. You made it clear that it wasn't your responsibility to ensure your sister had stability, that was her and her husband's job. Just as the argument intensified, your dad emerged from the room, trying to defend your mom's stance. He insisted your sister deserved the house because she hadn't received the same opportunities as you. That was when you felt a surge of disbelief. You shot back that the only reason your sister hadn't attended college was that she had dropped out of high school. Your parents didn't seem to grasp the gravity of what they were doing. They continued to insist you were successful enough to simply buy another house for yourself, as if that justified their actions. You were stunned, overwhelmed by their lack of understanding, and you stormed out, deciding to check into a hotel for the night. For the next few days, you felt lost and angry. The reality of the situation began to settle in. You realized that you couldn't continue paying the mortgage on a house that was no longer yours, but you also understood your parents wouldn't be able to afford the payments. You were filled with a mix of emotions, unsure of how to confront your parents about the betrayal you felt. On the following Monday, you went to the bank to check on the mortgage. You wanted to find out how much was left to pay after your years of extra payments. When you arrived at the bank, your dad said he needed to check with the loan manager for the remaining amount. You texted him later to ask him to take you to the bank for further details. You were determined to understand the mortgage status despite your feelings of anger and betrayal. When you got to the bank, you learned shocking information: the extra payments you had made over the years had never actually gone towards the mortgage. Your dad had been using that money for their rent instead. You were horrified to discover that while you had been living frugally, saving every penny to pay off the mortgage sooner, your parents were spending that extra money on their own living expenses. The bank manager confirmed your dad's claims, and the realization hit you hard. You sat there in disbelief, your mind racing with feelings of betrayal. When your dad pulled you aside, you confronted him about the money. You couldn't fathom how he could think it was acceptable to use funds intended for the mortgage to pay for their new apartment. You were filled with rage as you told him how unfair it was that they had forced you to buy a house, only to give it away to your sister without even informing you. Your father, not one to back down easily, fired back, reminding you that he had sacrificed everything to pay for your education. He insisted that you were not doing him any favors by buying the house, and he saw nothing wrong with how he was handling the finances. You snapped, explaining that you had intended the extra payments to go toward the mortgage, not to fund their living situation. Feeling overwhelmed by the conversation and the emotions swirling inside you, you left the bank in a daze, ignoring your father's calls after you stormed out. You didn't want to discuss anything further with your parents. As you walked to the subway station, you replayed the conversation in your head, struggling to comprehend the depths of your parents' actions and how deeply they had taken advantage of your generosity. You felt hurt and betrayed, unsure of what your next steps would be in dealing with this chaotic and painful situation. The narrator made a decisive choice to prioritize their well-being and distance themselves from their family's toxic behavior. They realized how their parents twisted their actions to make them feel indebted, despite the sacrifices the narrator had made. Feeling overwhelmed by their family's manipulation and emotional blackmail, the narrator recognized their right to feel angry and to set boundaries. In a previous update, the narrator clarified some points due to their emotional state, which made it hard to express themselves clearly. They addressed common questions from readers, such as their ethnicity, specifically that they are not Asian and that the stereotype of only Asian parents pushing their children hard does not reflect the reality. They also revealed that the loan in question was under their father's name and that they had not co-signed because they wanted to maintain their financial independence for future purchases like a car and a house. As time passed, the narrator took a stand against their family's expectations by stopping all mortgage payments on the house. They chose to block their parents and sister on their phone to eliminate further drama and negativity in their life. When their father confronted them at the door, he was filled with anger and guilt-tripped them about their sacrifices for college. The narrator countered this by pointing out that they had already paid back more than what their parents spent on their education through their contribution to the mortgage. They declared that they no longer felt obligated to support their family financially, especially since their parents treated them as a mere investment rather than a person. After the narrator's decision to stop payments, their parents were unable to keep up with the mortgage and ultimately lost the house to auction. This situation escalated when their sister, who had been living in the house, was unable to contribute to the payments and eventually had to move out. The parents attempted to liquidate their savings and retirement funds to save the house, but to no avail. When the sister refused to help with the mortgage, believing it was a gift, tensions rose, and the parents realized they had made a significant mistake. Despite the difficult circumstances, the narrator felt a sense of relief knowing they would no longer be expected to support their parents or sister financially. After the auction, their parents received some funds back, which they saved for retirement, claiming they no longer wanted to rely on their child. Meanwhile, the narrator moved into their own apartment, allowing them to enjoy privacy and independence. They also began saving for their future home, emphasizing their desire to own a place that would be entirely theirs. Through this experience, the narrator learned painful but important lessons about family dynamics and self-worth. They acknowledged that sometimes the people who are meant to care for you can be the ones who exploit your kindness. They no longer felt guilty for cutting ties with their family, understanding that they deserved better than to be treated like an ATM. In the end, the narrator focused on their financial security and personal happiness, recognizing that walking away from a toxic family was a necessary step toward a healthier life.